Perhaps the greatest thinker in the early church in dealing in relationship between culture and the individual, culture and the believer, was St. Augustine. He is the finest representative of the blending of classical and Christian ideas, and indeed one of the most brilliant thinkers in the history of the Western world. He was St. Augustine of Hippo. He was the Bishop of Hippo. He lived from 354 to 430. He was born into an urban family in what is now Algeria in North Africa. His mother was a pagan, his father was a pagan, his mother, Monica, a devout Christian. Because his family was poor, his father was a minor civil servant. The only avenue to access or success in a highly competitive world was a classical education. His father worked hard, saved, scrimped, and sent his son to school. Augustine's autobiography, The Confessions, is a literary masterpiece and one of the most influential books in the history of Europe and European culture. Written in the form of a prayer, The Confessions described Augustine's moral struggle, that powerful conflict between spiritual and intellectual aspirations and his sensual and material self. He said, "Great art thou, O Lord, and exceedingly to be praised. Great is thy power, and of thy wisdom there is no reckoning. Any man, indeed one part of my creation, has the will to praise thee. Yea, man, though he beat his morality about him, great art thou, O Lord, and exceedingly to be praised. Great is thy power and thy wisdom, there is no reckoning. Great art thou, O Lord, and exceedingly to be praised. Great is thy power, and of thy wisdom there is no reckoning. And man indeed, one part of thy creation, has the will to praise thee. Yea, man, though he bears his mortality about with him, even man, a small portion of thy creation, has the will to praise thee. Thou didst stir him up, that it may be a delight to him to praise thee. For thou hast made us for thyself, and our hearts are restless until they find repose in thee." Many Greek and Roman philosophers had taught that the knowledge and virtue are the same, that knowledge and virtue are identical. A person who really knows what is right will do what is right. Augustine rejected that idea. He believed that a person may know what is right, but can fail to act righteously because of the innate weakness of the human will. People do not always act on the basis of rational knowledge. Here Augustine made a profound contribution to the understanding of human nature. He demonstrated that a learned person can also be corrupt and evil. The Confessions marks the Augustinian balance, the historical synthesis. The Confessions marks the Augustinian balance, the historical synthesis of Greco-Roman culture and Christian thought. Augustine's ideas on sin, grace, and redemption became the foundation of all subsequent Christian theology, Protestant as well as Catholic. He wrote that the basis or dynamic force in any individual is the will, which he declared as the power of the soul to hold on to or to obtain any object without constraint. When Adam ate the fruit forbidden by God in the Garden of Eden, Genesis 3:6, he committed the original sin and corrupted the will by concupiscence or sexual desire, which all humans have. Adam's sin was passed on by hereditary transmission through the flesh to all humanity. Original sin, in his view, became a common social stain. Because Adam disobeyed God and fell, so all human beings have an innate tendency to sin. Their will is weak. But according to Augustine, God restores the strength of the world through grace, which is transmitted through the sacraments. That is essentially the Catholic theological position. Protestants would agree, though a personal acceptance and relationship with God through Christ is essential for Protestants as well. In the fight to subdue the will. Being a Christian and a member of the church, Augustine maintained, meant striving for holiness rather than seeing themselves as part. Being Christian and a member of the church, Augustine maintained, meant striving for holiness rather than seeing themselves as part of free. Being a Christian and a member of the church, Augustine maintained, meant striving for holiness rather than seeing themselves as apart from society. Christians must live to transform society. The notion of the church as a spiritual elite, distinct from and superior to the rest of society, appeared many times in the Middle Ages, and each time it was declared a heresy. Augustine's arguments were marshaled against it. When the Visigothic chieftain Alaric conquered Rome in 410, horrified pagans blamed the disaster on Christians. In response, Augustine wrote City of God. This profoundly original work contrasts Christianity with the secular society in which it existed. City of God presents a moral interpretation of the Roman government, in fact, of all history. Filled with references to ancient history and mythology, it remained for centuries the standard statement of the Christian philosophy of history. According to Augustine, history is the account of God's acting in time. Human history reveals that there are two kinds of people: those who live according to the flesh in the city of Babylon, and those who live according to the Spirit in the city of God. The former will endure eternal hellfire. The latter enjoy eternal bliss. Augustine maintained that states came into existence as a result of Adam's fall and people's inclination to sin. The state is a necessary evil, but it can work for good by providing the peace, justice, and order that Christians need in order to pursue their pilgrimage to the city of God. It's very important to understand that Augustine's insights have affected Western culture. The presumption that the actions of sinful people need to be corralled either by the rule of the government statute or the rule of government statute and the enforcement of or by internal moral restraint in response to God's grace. The structure of government, even in democratic societies, presumes that citizens are flawed, willfully inclined toward the selfish exercise of their personal desires, and must be restrained by law. Western jurisprudence does not presume that people are perfect. Religious leaders, by the application of the means of grace, help people to do the things they do not want to do, or do the things that they do not want to do. Religious leaders, by the application of the means of grace, help people do the things they do not want to do, or not do the things they do want to do. If they fail, the law steps in to supply the restraint by warning or punishment. Augustine asserted that the will must be restrained. Although the creation of the state results from a moral flaw, from sin, the church itself, the Christian community, is not free from sin. The church is certainly not the equivalent of the city of God. But the church, which is concerned with salvation, is responsible for everyone, including Christian rulers. Thinkers in the Middle Ages used Augustine's theory to defend their belief in the ultimate superiority of the spiritual power over civilian government. That remained the dominant political theory until the late 13th century. Powerful echoes of Augustine's political thought were taken up and advanced in Protestant political theory, particularly in the writings of John Calvin and Martin Luther. Powerful echoes of Augustine's political thought were taken up and advanced in Protestant political. Cut this damn thing off. Powerful echoes of Augustine's political thought were taken up and advanced in Protestant political theory, particularly in the writings of John Calvin and Martin Luther. They did not believe that the church should dictate government policy, although individual Christians in leadership roles could influence policy as a part of their Christian commitment. They believed that it was the function of the state to provide the pathway and protection for the church to do its work of salvation and its ministry of healing.